Hi folks and welcome. As Pete said, my name's Anthony. I am the designer and I guess the owner of JoomlaBamboo. I'll do a little spiel about me. That's actually not me. I first learned about Joomla when I needed to build a website for my acupuncture practice. I'm still an acupuncturist and sort of split my time a little bit between designing websites and treating people. When I first started looking at Joomla, I was really excited by the challenge of actually building a website and having control over it. And I imagine that that's probably the bug that everybody in here's got as well. You know, it's about, you know, I've got full control over my website. I've got control over how it looks and how it presents. So I was really taken by that challenge. And so in around 2006, I built my first template, and my curiosity was really piqued, and so I started producing more just for the fun of it. And in late 2006, I launched JoomlaBamboo.com. So this is the homepage for JoomlaBamboo. Since 2006, we've released about 80 or so templates. 30 or more of them are responsive. The first responsive design we put out was in October 2011. So we're kind of quite a way down the track from when we released that first theme. And quite a few things have changed in the Joomla world, as well as just the general web world when it comes to responsive design. Here are a whole stack of different screenshots of the designs we've put out over the last little bit, not all of them. I need to delete one of these. This is the last one we released last month. So in addition to this, we created a module called Zentools, which is a responsive module solution for creating content and image galleries. We did that in 2011. When we first created the responsive template, we figured we actually needed, there wasn't really much else in Joomla that was also responsive in terms of content sliders and image sliders and grids and that sort of stuff. So we really needed something to tie in to our template presentations the way that, you know, a module or a component. So at that point we had maybe 6 or 7 different modules that did more or less the same thing. You know, we had or the code was the same, but it looked different. So the appearance was different. It might look like a grid, or it might look like a slideshow, but actually under the hood, the code really was very similar. We're just getting a title, an image, and then using CSS or HTML to change the way it looks. So I figured, why not just pull our resources and create one solution for that? And so Zentools is that solution. So you can create grids, lists, carousels, accordions, filtered layouts, and more. It comes with a responsive lightbox. It supports Joomla, K2, and images as a source. And version 2 will also be able to pull in more content streams like Flickr, you know, maybe Facebook, and basically just pull in content and information from around the web and then create, you know, add it to a Joomla module. It also has built-in resizing and also drag and drop templating in the back end. So that's basically my pedigree for responsive design. I first started to learn about it in sort of August or September of 2011, and from there, that's basically all I've been doing. So who here actually has a responsive website? Okay, so there's about, what, 30%, 40% have got a responsive website? And who's, you've obviously used a responsive template for that before, to create the template, to create the site. Who actually built the responsive template? Okay, cool.
Oh no, I didn't know.
You almost built it.
I'd like to.
You like to, yeah. Alright, and so who here doesn't have a smartphone? You don't have a smartphone? No?
No, it's an iPhone.
Oh, right, yeah. Even if you've got a dumb smartphone, it's still a smartphone. So one person, that's good, I didn't expect any. So basically, we're in the thrust of this mobile generation. So you can't walk the streets in Melbourne particularly, and also in Sydney or anywhere in the world without seeing somebody looking at their phone. Last week I was, and I kind of get shocked by that. You know, I was sort of, you know, approaching 40. I didn't grow up where mobiles were ubiquitous, and so when I'm, you know, out in public, you know, because I'm rarely out in public because I'm always in my office. When I'm out in public and I see so many people engaged with the phone, I get a real shock. You know, so last week I was sitting waiting for some takeaway food, and I looked up for my phone because I look at my phone all the time, and there were 9 people sitting opposite the wall, and they were all looking at their phone. Nobody was engaged with, you know, with the world around them. That everything was you know, in that handheld device. So to say that mobile is everywhere is really just an understatement. So what does that actually mean in terms of statistics and you know, across the world? According to Mashable, I think these stats are from earlier this year, but basically 17.4% of mobile traffic is from a mobile internet traffic is from a mobile device, and South America, Asia, and Africa are really kind of pushing that. So you can see that Australia is sort of a little bit below the average. Asia is well above the average there, and it's really the developing areas that are pushing with the mobile. That's not really new information. I bet you've heard that before. You know, that mobile is really big in Africa. So 2.1 billion mobile web users in the world at the end of 2012. Mobile broadband subscriptions outnumbered fixed line subscriptions by a factor of 3 to 1. And this is the interesting thing. In most cases in developing world, we've got a fixed, in countries in, you know, America, Australia, and Europe, there's a mobile subscription as well as a fixed line subscription, whereas in the other countries, other areas, it's generally just the mobile only. So here's a nice pie graph showing you the increase in mobile usage, and it effectively doubled in the year from 2012 to 2013 for the first quarter, which I think, you know, I think that's a really amazing indicator of where things are going. You know, we want our information wherever we are, and obviously the mobile is the way to do that. So how important is it to have a responsive website, or a website that is optimized for mobile use? And maybe a better question is, like, should you make it a priority for your website now? Who's actually asked that question? If you don't have a responsive website, do you feel like it's something that you really should be getting onto, and you feel panicky about it? Yes. Right, okay.
Only if you want to be successful online.
Yeah, right.
You don't really care, or it's only for people who are sitting in offices for like the application of it. Well, then it's okay.
So it depends on the context, isn't it? It depends on what kind of website you're running. So basically, based on the figures of, you know, 17.4% mobile usage, you should really just kind of get out there and make your website responsive or optimized for mobile, you know, now. I like to sort of step back a little bit from that. You know, I think it's important to do that at some point, but should you make it a priority right now? I think that's the big question. So, from my research, I found that there are a couple of factors that led to a site that was actually being used or accessed via a mobile device more than others. And typically, people will access sites for like newspapers, magazines, but where you actually consume information via a mobile device, and particularly iPads or tablets and that sort of thing. There are also sites where there's a really strong email campaign. So a lot of email is read via the mobile. You send out the email burst, people click on a link from their mobile. So therefore, you know, you need to have your site optimized for mobile if you're really utilizing email. Likewise, you know, if you've got a really strong social media campaign as well, I mean, that just kind of stands to reason. Everybody on their phone connecting with Facebook and Twitter. And also sites that offer local information, so tourism, local events, people trying to find places like the venue for the Sydney JoomlaDay. What other types of sites do you think, or maybe in your experience, have you got where there's a high percentage of mobile users?
I've got the site which I run for a client. They run dance studios and dance classes.
Okay.
So it's the parents trying to find out information about the dance class. What teachers on that night, can they get in touch and let the class know, look, sorry, my daughter's sick today.
Yep.
So they find a very high volume of mobile phone usage that way.
Yeah. So that will fit in the last category, maybe like the local information, events, where you kind of press for time and you really need to just find out some information quickly. All right. This is probably a point for me, really, because these stats are kind of based on my site. My Internet Explorer visitors are higher than the mobile visitors that visit my particular site. So, and I'm going to show you some stats in a little bit to verify that. But at the moment, one of the things you should consider about whether to spend time and resources prioritising for mobile right now is whether is that balance between users using browsers that aren't very sexy and take a lot of work and they're kind of pains really, or optimizing for mobile. So it's not to say that you shouldn't optimize for mobile, but if you push for resources and your site doesn't look good in IE8, and you have a lot of visitors accessing the site, a lot more visitors accessing the site in IE8, then why not spend the time and money there? I mean, I think that's it kind of just stands to reason, but nobody likes doing that. This is the latest stats from browser stats. Basically, IE8 and below still have around 11% of worldwide usage, which is terrifying, but just part of the world we live in. Hopefully that'll change over the next 12 months. So despite all of these things, like if you've got a client, you're building sites for clients, they're probably going to want a mobile optimized site. Even if you went through all these factors, they were probably going to push you in that direction anyway. The fine print is really about figuring out whether you should be making building for mobile a priority for now, rather than sort of 6-12 months down the track. All right, so this is my own site, and it shows you a graph of mobile usage. You can see that it's really tiny. So I was kind of shocked when I looked at the other case studies about percentages of people, with kind of what I would consider to be normal sites had a much greater mobile usage, and this really just suits what the clientele for my website is. It's for people, for web developers, web designers, and site builders, just basically accessing at work on a desktop, looking at designs or checking the forum. Accessing ticket system, reading the blog, for instance. So a lot of that just takes place, when you're at work, because it seems to be like a work-focused website. We run a monthly email campaign. We've got 4,000 or so, or approaching 4,000 Twitter followers, and a very small Facebook engagement. This is an example of a local radio station. And it's got a completely different picture, well, actually not completely different, but a much more impressive picture in terms of mobile engagement. There's 20% mobile as opposed to 2% or 4% in my case, which probably points to the demographic. There's a really strong social component. There's a lot of Facebook fans, and a lot of people accessing the site via mobile. This is another site in the States that has a similar sort of spec in terms of mobile usage. Their numbers are profound. We're talking about 600,000 hits a month in terms of what they're looking at, and they're seeing a very similar thing. And again, it's about local engagement. It's about information. It's about people checking timetables for events and that sort of thing. How do I get to the venue? What time does it start? All of that basic sort of information. The social thing's relatively new to them, so they've got a very small social component, but they're starting to build that up. But I think the key factor here is the local stuff first and the email campaign, which is it's just pretty strong at 60,000 users per month. So does anyone here have examples of sites that actually have 0 to no, or a couple of percentage of mobile engagement, like my own site? Or somebody have more than 20% mobile engagement? What's yours?
They have a client who's a photographer, and they have about 30 to 35%.
Wow, okay.
I think most of the time when I look at the actual stats is during the peak hour when they're in public transport, mostly I reckon the girls say they're getting married for a wedding.
Yeah, okay.
So what they do, just wedding photography is the keyword that they search for. The majority of them are mobile.
Yep.
And they spend a lot more time on the site than they do actually do on the desktop.
Wow, that's impressive.
Keyword, yeah, which is quite interesting.
Yes. Yeah. So 35%, did you say?
30 to 35% on average. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
53%.
53.
Yeah, radio station in Victoria.
Okay. What's the radio station?
Bay FM.
Okay.
In Geelong.
And what's the what sort of, is there a lot of social engagement? And
It's local news.
Yeah.
A lot of local news is the primary driver. But interesting with the demographics actually at 35 plus.
okay. So again, maybe, and can you track it down to time of day? So is it like peak hour, commuter?
It's a mix. It's usually after peak hour, so after people get to work. They
Okay.
hear something on the radio, then they refer to it when they get to work.
Yeah, right. On the mobile, they're referred
On the
to.
mobile, yeah. In offices, they're just...
Yeah, well, they can't do it on work.
Yeah, so maybe the computer's
So
like
they
that.
exactly.
Maybe that's another factor that I missed. Was there another hand up? Yeah.
Yeah, drive-through parmesanas, chicken parmesanas, and they're, I just checked, it's 68%.
Wow.
Yeah, so that's, they're a specific drive-through business. You ring up and you drive through like a bottle shop and you pick up a chicken parmesana.
Wow.
And when we went through with the client when we first built it, we anticipated that, but we didn't anticipate it being all the time. We anticipated it being after about 9 o'clock. So we did a few things where when you go to the site after 9 o'clock, all you see is the phone number. That's it.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Wow, so that it...
Because people ringing after 9 o'clock, chances are they're probably on a Saturday night half pissed and they just want to
Okay. Yeah, right.
give them a number.
So they don't need the booze, they just need the parma.
Just
Yeah. Was there another hand up? Okay, so that's such a diverse selection of numbers. To go from 4% to 63% is just, that's amazing. So, and as I said, it's really about trying to figure out if the market or your audience for your website is accessing the site via mobile, and it's not really. I don't think it really matters if it's optimized for mobile yet. People are still just trying to access it via mobile. So it's not a case that my site isn't optimized for mobile, so people don't use the mobile to access it. I think it's really just about how the user uses the actual website and how they access the content. All right. So should you make it a priority for an existing site? The short term, the answer is it depends. The long term, the answer is definitely. Okay, so it's the way of the future. It's where people are really using the web, and it's something to put on your list. But you have to figure out whether it's a short term, mid term, or long term goal. For me, I think it's about when I get the next inspiration to redesign my website, and then I'll just make it responsive then. For you, if you're instructing a client, I would probably look at trying to bundle in the mobile stuff straight away. Should you optimize news sites for mobile? I think the answer is yes. Yeah, I think that's just kind of fundamental because usage is increasing rapidly. Adding the optimized mobile component to a quotation is really, it's just a little bit extra. Even if it's a big job, it might just be 25% of the bill, and you can sell that as avoiding a redesign later on down the track. There we go, and it's highly likely that your client will want it anyway. So I think it's smart. It's smart work to build all new sites optimized for mobile, but you have to be discerning about whether you do it for existing sites. All right. So The other kind of amazing thing that I found when I was doing the research for this is the sheer number of devices available. You know, when you think about it, if you're like Pete and you're an Apple fanboy, there are only like 5 devices, you know, or less. But as soon as I started looking, you know, there are actually thousands of devices and thousands of screen dimensions that you need to optimize your site for. So if anybody remembers back in the old days when we had a choice of VHS or beta, it's not like that. You know, it's not about saying, okay, somebody's on a mobile, somebody's on a desktop, let's just kind of separate the content, or let's separate the experience of the website based on that. The boundary and the threshold between mobile and desktop is changing every day almost, and it's not easy to really kind of understand where the desktop ends and the mobile begins. So it seems amazing that only in 2007 the first iPhone was released, 2008 was the first Android device, 2010 was the first iPad, 2012 there were almost 4,000 Android devices. So these are actual physical units with similar or different dimensions and specs. You've changed it?
8.
Oh, it's
3998.
well, no, you haven't seen the next number. So how many Android devices do you think there are in 2013?
Lots.
Yeah, lots. It's a bit like guessing the number of jelly beans in a jar. Yeah, it's probably more than that now. So, I mean, it seems incredible that, you know, we'd have to kind of start thinking about, you know, how to prepare a website for 12,000 different devices. You know, or even if we figured out that we had 3 essential screen sizes, which this next screen shows us that there aren't. You know, like it's impossible to determine what, you know, how to prepare a site for all of these devices now, let alone the future devices in the future. So the future devices in the future, I'll just say that again. So this really kind of points to fragmentation of the mobile market. Okay, tablets and phones are so diverse that the screen dimensions, the capabilities, the functionalities are all completely diverse. So it just kind of seems pointless to try and target these ones specifically. So it brings us to a fork in the road. So how do we actually go about supporting that? And before we do that, we need to figure out what options there are, and also, you know, how to cope with a rapidly changing landscape. There are basically 2 different options in terms of preparing a website or optimizing it for mobile use. The first is using a dedicated mobile theme, and the second is preparing what's called a responsive template, or responsive theme. And neither is perfect just yet. Okay, there are detractors for responsive, there are detractors for dedicated mobile themes. So a dedicated mobile theme uses PHP to browser sniff what the browser is that the visitor is using, and then serve up a template based on the findings. So there are some pros for that. Mobile themes are overwhelmingly fast because they're built specifically for the mobile. So they're not just mobile first; they're mobile only. You can take advantage. Another pro is that you can take advantage of built-in functionality in the actual phone or the tablet. So, you know, if it's a location service, or if it's something to do with the way that they're engaging with iOS, for instance, you know, that's something that built-in that you can specifically build into a mobile theme. It can sometimes be easier to implement depending on the design. And often CMSs come with plugins or standalone themes that basically you just turn them on and suddenly you've got a mobile website. The cons are that the browser sniffing is not 100% accurate. That the threshold, as I mentioned just before, between mobile and desktop is changing. So even though you could adjust where what operating system triggers the mobile theme, that is still going to change, and it's still not going to be 100% accurate. when I go to a website and I see that there's a link to the full website on the page, I immediately feel like I'm cheated. I don't know if anybody else feels like that, or maybe it's just my own anxiety. But I think, oh, I must be missing out on something. So I click on the full website, and then the full website experience is really lackluster. You know, it's hard to navigate, and I don't really like pinching and zooming. It may mean managing multiple sets of content. So I think it was interesting what Andrew brought up in the earlier lecture about using adaptive content. I think that's kind of a leading edge of mobile design, and I think it really depends on the site. It kind of seems like a bit of a pain to me to have to prepare 2 or 3 titles for an article, specify intro text. It really depends on your resources. So if you've got a big team running a bigger website, then you can probably afford to do it. Half time now. Okay, quick, I'll speed up. And also you run into SEO issues, with multiple domains, sharing links, particularly in social media. I can't count the number of times I've been sitting at my desktop, I've clicked a link and it's taken me to a mobile site, and it's just kind of, it just kind of looks weird. Like there wasn't enough sniffing on there to tell me to tell the site that I was on a desktop. So here are some examples. There's Amazon, the BBC website, and CNN. So they all kind of look kind of nice and compacted. They're mobile first, all the information there is accessible, the menu systems are all accessible. From that point of view, they really make a lot of sense. Our other option, as I mentioned, is a responsive theme. And responsive is really basically a single template using media queries to change the design based on the screen dimensions. Okay? That's kind of it in a nutshell. The pros are that you use a single theme across all present and future devices. You've got a single set of content. Oops. Just lost that. You've got a single set of content. You've got a single site, so there's no mobile site. Thank you. Okay. Great. They're easy-ish to update. It's just one theme, so you just kind of deploy it, and then it's sits across all the devices fine, and it will cater to any screen size. The cons are that it can take longer to implement. It's more challenging to optimize for content for different devices. So there's no real built-in way to kind of do that. If you're just serving one site, then you've got to use CSS or JavaScript in order to hide or display content, which is that's basically what we're working with now, but it's not ideal. It can be slower. The site itself can be slower if it's not designed for mobile first. So if you're not taking into account that people are accessing the site on a mobile, then if you're loading all of the assets that the desktop requires, then it's going to be a slow experience on a mobile. And the last con there, I'm not sure how true that is for now, but when the media query spec first came out, not all mobile browsers actually supported media queries. This is one of the first sites that I really enjoyed moving the browser in and out of, and it's such a simple site, but the way that they've thought about the way that the information is portrayed at different screen sizes is just beautiful. It's foodsense.ie. I'd definitely check that out if you have time. So responsive design is really about aiming to provide a single design for multiple contexts, so that you've got one design, one set of code that fits all solutions. Is it the future? I'm not sure if responsive design is the future, but it's certainly the now. I think that it makes a lot more sense to use a responsive template than it does to use a dedicated mobile theme. In terms of what the future holds, I really don't know what's going to happen in terms of technology changes, but at the moment this is certainly the leading edge in my opinion. Alright, so we might skip through a lot of this stuff. Mobile design came in May 25, 2010. Ethan Marcotte released a book called Responsive Web Design. June 7, oh sorry, I'm reading that ahead of time. He released an article. Released a book in June 7, 2011. September 2011, the Boston Globe had a redesign, which was thought to be the first really big website to undergo a responsive makeover. I'm not sure if it's. I'll just click on this link here. It's a pretty simple site. Now you can see it here.
Commonwealth Bank's done a pretty good job as well.
What's that?
Commonwealth Bank.
Commonwealth Bank. Okay.
They just recently about 3 months ago.
Yeah, right. I haven't seen that one. You can see as the site changes, the menu changes, the number of columns change. One of the things about this was really, it was the first test case of a really big site with lots of visitors changing. It looks kind of simple, like if you compare it now to with the type of designs that we're seeing. But it's, yeah, it was sort of like groundbreaking when it was first brought out. Alright, October 2011 we made our first responsive design. This is kind of important, I think. Late in 2012, Google recommended responsive design as the best practice for optimizing for mobile. Yeah. And at the start of this year, my nana started using responsive design. Sydney Red. Okay. So what is web responsive design? Responsive design really has, like, at its real basic, has 3 key facets. It's a fluid grid. So rather than using fixed pixel values for the grid, it's percentage based. It uses breakpoints and media queries to change the way that the design works at certain screen sizes. And it uses flexible elements, so that includes images, video, and type and more things. A lot of people say that it's also it's about being mobile first. And they'll kind of add their own spin onto what responsive design is. And I agree, mobile first is important. And Shane's doing a talk on that later on this afternoon, which I think is going to be quite interesting. But at its really basic level, this is what responsive design is about. Okay, so there are 3 essential types of responsive design. In terms of the way that the grid operates, adaptive, responsive, and mixed. And I've prepared a little demo to show you how that works. Okay, so we're going to look at adaptive first. So we've got our main content body there, which has a maximum width of 1060 pixels. And adaptive will basically, when the design breaks, it'll create a new breakpoint, and then the main container will then have another fixed width. We break the design again, and it'll go down, and go down, and go down. So as the screen changes, the actual main container just remains fixed. I'm quite a fan of that. I think you can do a lot with in terms of design sense from that point of view. If you look at responsive, it's overwhelmingly really just about percentage. Okay, so you move the browser down, and it's always a certain percentage of the window width. So in this case, it's 90%. Again, with a maximum width of 1060. Mixed is a combination of the two. So we have some fixed values for wider screens, and then when we get to smaller screens, we just make it squishy. All right. I might stick that on GitHub or something so you can download it. Alright, so the fluid grid is really fundamental to responsive design. In the old days, we used to, particularly when the 960 grid came out, it was really based around having a main container that was 960 pixels wide, and each column within the grid was assigned a fixed width. Responsive design is really about percentage-based columns, so a percentage grid, with the outer container having either a fixed, a max width, or even a percentage-based value for the width. So if you can see here, this is what the 960 grid looked like. Each column or each division within the grid was assigned a pixel width. A classic percentage grid that you'll see in Bootstrap or any of the other responsive frameworks uses percentages for that. And what I'd like liked recently is something that's kind of a little bit more obvious to the end user. You know, is the column filling a quarter of the space? Is it filling half of the space? Is it filling 3/4 of the space? I think it's a much more semantic way of understanding the elements, and the Inuit CSS framework uses this. Seth Warburton uses this way in his OneWeb Joomla template, which I highly recommend you download. So the grid looks like this. So we basically have fixed widths, pixel values showing up here, but they always remain relative to each other. So the third width is always going to take up a third of the space allowed by the parent container. In the responsive design, example, it's going to continually change because the parent container is changing the width. And in adaptive, you get the same thing. And then when we squish down to the lowest setting or to a mobile setting, all of the grids become 100%, you know, or in this case 444 pixels. So in a sense, depending on the design, you're still dealing with pixels, but it's all it's an aspect ratio rather than it's a relative grid rather than a fixed grid. Right. So in order to use the grid, we need to use breakpoints, and a breakpoint literally means the point at which your design breaks. Okay, a lot of people get caught up on designing or optimizing for specific devices. So let's make it look good on an iPad in portrait view. Let's make it look good on a Samsung, you know, whatever in landscape mode. That's important, and you need to check that your design doesn't look bad in those things. But what is leading those decisions is really where the design breaks, rather than setting out to target a specific device. In order to make breakpoints, we need to use media queries. And these are really the key foundation to responsive design. It's a CS3 technique which allows you to target screen sizes and dimensions. They're just added basically in your where you add normal CSS. So it can be in your core CSS file or in a separated responsive CSS file. And they're really simple, or relatively simple. You get to define that this should only affect the screen, and then you define either a minimum width or a maximum width that these rules should affect. You can also optimize for the screen rotation as well. So if there's a particular bug that you can't figure out how to target with just min width or max widths, you can target a specific orientation, which can be quite handy. And of course, you can target Retina devices as well. So high-resolution devices, you can determine you know, a specific set of CSS rules. All right. So I'll just bring this up here. So in this demo here, as you can see, the background changes, and I've set that via media query. So when we get to 1200 pixels, the background goes sort of like purple, 980 we get red, 780 we get green, and then another shade of green. 20 minutes? 10? 15? 15. Alright. And it's done really simply, okay? So this is just a really basic example here. So let's see where we are. We're at 862, so let's go up here. So, okay, so that's a maximum width of 999 pixels. If we wanted to change the body background to black, we just type black in there, and so therefore when we get to 999 pixels, the background for the body is black. Okay, so let's change it to blue, grey, blah blah blah. Okay, so it's really quite simple to just use CSS that you're already kind of so proficient in, and target the device width that you want to make a change to. So we could also change the wrapper size as well. So let's make sure we're on adaptive, and let's say it's 70 pixels. So the way I sketch out a design is really just to, start off with 940 pixels or 1140 or whatever the starting point is, and then I just resize the browser. And when I see a scroll bar, that's when I need to use a new media query. Responsive design is more than that, but that's basically how you go about scaffolding a responsive template. Okay, let's see where we're up to. So I mentioned before that we have fluid images. Images can be problematic when it comes to cross-browser stuff, or when you're using a CMS which is embedding the inline width and height of an element. But at its most basic, creating a fluid image is setting a maximum width of 100%. And the max width pertains to the width of the parent container. So whatever the width of the parent container is, the image won't go outside of that. You can see here in this demo, no, you can't, man. All right, let's just image, no. Images, there we go.
That is one of your best photos ever, dude.
Thanks, man.
It's just freaking awesome.
So as I resize the browser, the image just rescales, resizes according to the width of the parent container, and in this case, it's just the window browser.
You can set breakpoints on the image too, can't you?
Yeah, you could do that as well. So if you're using the adaptive model, you could say 800 pixels, or
I've used it for logos, so the logo doesn't get below a certain size.
Yeah, that's a good idea. In XenTools, we actually created a system where we can load a different image based on the screen dimensions. Because sometimes you might have, on wide screens in a grid, you might have small thumbnails, but then on the mobile, because it's going down to a full width row, you actually need quite a big image. So I think it's smart to be able to control the resolution of the image across the browser, and to do that you can use JavaScript. So it basically just tests the width of the window and then loads a new image based on a data attribute. Right. Okay, fluid images, fluid video is pretty similar. You need CSS plus a bit of JavaScript. That's not all the JavaScript. I don't think I have a demo for that. Fluid type. This is kind of an interesting one, and it's something I haven't really spent a lot of time on, but it's about optimizing the line length of your articles for the device. Some studies show that there's the optimum number of characters per line is about 45 to 75 characters. And so it would be a matter of looking through the different devices or the resolutions in the browser and trying to keep to something within those limits.
That's actual characters of text.
Yeah. And again, you would just use either CSS or JavaScript for that. CSS mainly because you can just target the font size directly. There's some JavaScript examples of how to do that, but that's mainly for headings. There's one called fit text, which does that. So what are the challenges for responsive design? To my mind, there are two major ones, and the first one is really the navigation. I don't think there's a single solution that really addresses the best way to create navigation for responsive sites. I'm going to show you some demos of the different options that exist at the moment. But I find that the most problematic, and it's really the one that you need to choose on a case-by-case basis. So do you have a really big menu system? Is it really basic? I think the actual nature and the context of the site will actually determine how you approach the menu. So let's bring that up. Okay, so this is, you've probably seen this one before. So the select menu, so we've got our standard menu up the top there, and when the browser resizes, we can come down and it turns into a select menu. Okay, This one works really well on iPhones and iPads, or not necessarily iPads because you might not be triggering the responsive menu on an iPad. But I really like the way that the select menu looks in iOS and WebKit. In Firefox it looks really ugly. So it really affects the design and the presentation of the site. You can of course style the select menu, so that's another factor to consider. The next is the toggle menu. So, 10 minutes. So once we get down to where the nav's collapsed, we click on the button and that just expands the menu. I quite like this one. You can position the toggle menu absolutely positioned so it sits on top of the content, or you can make it relatively positioned so it pushes the content down. Again, it really depends on the type of menu structure that you have. You can also nest other collapsible accordions within that if you've got a particularly complex menu system. I think I caught this one off canvas. Yeah. This is another one that I quite like. So when we get down to responsive size, we have one that sits off to the side. I really like the way that this works because I'm not sure that this demo is going to show it, but you can have a really long menu system, and you don't have to change the way that the menu appears on the mobile. I mean, you can change the way it appears, but you don't have to reduce the number of menu items. That's my favourite at the moment, but again, it depends on the context. And another one for is basically where the menu collapses. And it uses absolute positioning to push the menu items to the top of the page on the desktop, but in the source they're really sitting at the bottom. So when you click on it, it takes you to the bottom of the content. This is probably the most accessible. It doesn't use JavaScript to do this. It does, however, have it's quite jerky, and one of the cons that I read about was that it kind of interrupts the user experience, particularly on a mobile. You're so used to everything smoothly scrolling and everything being quite smooth, whereas this can be quite jumpy. You can obviously add smooth scroll or something like that to it. I think that was the last one that I did. And the other big challenge, I think, for responsive design is page load. So this is the one thing that a dedicated mobile theme has over responsive design, but it's not an impossible thing to solve. But it just takes a bit of work, particularly when you're dealing with a CMS. And it's really about just loading the assets that are the most essential for the page first. Okay, so you think about what content does the user need to see first. You don't want the user to have to wait 40 seconds before they see your call to action, for instance. You really want to have the content that you want your users to act upon or consume, right up front and centre, and then you can load everything else either in the background or not load it at all. There's some really great JavaScript scripts out there that control the way that lazy load those sort of things. So I think it's called respond.js, which I've used before, which uses data attributes to determine which elements to load on the page based on screen size. And so there we are. That's my introduction to responsive design. Do you have any questions? And there's no pressure, but there might be some prizes for the best questions.
And I'll just
except for
the
Norm.
microphone around as well. So, Norm? Just for the video.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on your ideas on, when I think of responsive design, I'm not just thinking about how it looks on the screen, I'm thinking about the person on the other side of the screen. I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
Who's the person on the other side?
Well, what I'm saying is creating responsive design from not just responding to the device, but, for instance, in your site, it doesn't surprise me that your mobile numbers are so low because the people using your site are probably about to download something, so therefore they're probably not.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, exactly.
You know, how do you approach that when thinking about the person on the other side of the screen?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think your example was really good. You know, you only show the phone number after a certain time. You know, you don't let people order online. I think that's a really interesting way to solve a problem. You know, and I think that responsive design is about that. You know, trying to remain flexible to all sorts of different contexts. You know, so being able to be flexible about how the information is presented and how the design is presented, but we can't really browser test, you know, whether the person has a visual impairment. You know, so we are kind of limited to the design, but you can look at the behaviour. So, you know, in the peak hour commuter browsing your website, you know, maybe there are things that you can do there to speed things up. Whereas at the non-peak times, you know, maybe you can add, other bits of information. Yeah, I think that's kind of an unknown, and it's really a case-by-case basis. Yeah.
Got a question here?
Yeah.
If you're embedding video on your site, quite often, like with YouTube these days, they provide you like an iframe tag, and that usually has a width and a height parameter built in. Is there any techniques you can use to scale your embedded videos for different sizes? Yeah, you need a CSS and JavaScript solution for that, and there are some plugins out there that will do that for you if you're using a Joomla site. I've actually got one that's called FitVids, which uses JavaScript from CSS Tricks, you know, which basically applies the appropriate padding and positioning for that. And the JoomlaWorks plugin, All Videos, now has a responsive solution as well, which is, you know, quite an easy thing to implement. Yeah. So I can't give Norm away any more prizes, but could we give a coupon?
Testing for testing the different responsiveness and that sort of stuff. Do you still use A and B testing for it and that style of testing, or have you moved on from doing that style of testing?
Do you mean for my site or just...
Right, and general template development?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a bit of a freak when it comes to this, because the last live site I deployed was, you know, like a year and a half ago, you know, so I'm just creating, I mean, every demo is a live site, but I'm not really in the real world, you know, I'm kind of embedded in responsive techniques, but that's why I like coming to these days, you know, I really get to hear how people implement stuff, you know. I think that's in terms of my own site, I want to have the time to be able to do A and B testing. I think that's really important. I'm not sure how that works in a responsive landscape though.
One of the biggest experiences I've noted to date is when I roll a template out, you put so much time and effort in making it responsive, getting it to work.
Yep.
To then go and create a B version of it is just so much extra, and quite often you run out of budget for clients.
Yeah, the way I understand A and B testing is that the changes are quite small, so it often comes down to, you know, call to action text or variation of colour, and, you know, so those things should be reasonably easy to manipulate. But if you're A/B testing, you know, big changes in design, then, you know, I think maybe that might be a fringe case.
There are some tools available online that you can actually, I'll find the website. You direct it to your site and you tell it you want to A/B test this page of the site. And what it does, you can literally, in the browser itself, as you're pointing to sites, you can rearrange your text and your layout.
Okay.
And then creates a version. And what you do is you tell it, I want 20 or 30% of my traffic to go to this version versus that version. So I'm not sure if it supports responsive, but I'll send out the URL once I find another one.
Yeah, I think Google, you're talking about the Google A/B testing?
No, it's not Google one, it's another one. Actually, literally what it does, looks at your browser, your site, and makes the whole layout editable. You
right.
Drag and drop everything.
Yeah, right, that sounds great.
Site, which is just absolutely fantastic. Use all the statistics as well.
Two more questions, please.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks, Andre.
Two more questions.
Hi Anthony, I'm a newbie to all of this,
okay.
And recently I've just been searching online I'm teaching myself at home about Joomla. I have watched and seen that you were mentioned in some lynda.com videos and have
okay.
and
mentioned well, or?
Yes, where to buy templates.
Okay, great. Phew.
My question is, how do you feel that I don't know if you would have researched other people's, how do you feel your responsive templates stack up against other places where I can go and get a membership, say like Rocket Things. I'm yet to decide.
Yeah. The irony is that you're about to receive a coupon to the. So maybe I don't have to answer that. Look,
It's free.
In terms of the Joomla template landscape, it's incredibly competitive, and you have to really stay on or try and stay on the edge of innovation in order to do well. I think at the start of this year we moved to using T3 for our framework. We had our own developed the Zengrid framework for all 1.5, 2.5 sites. But I think the world just keeps changing, and I love looking at UTheme and Rocket Theme and Joomla and all of my competitors and seeing what they're doing, because I think it's my club is not going to answer everybody's question, and I think that's the case for the other clubs as well. I think that each framework has their own pluses and minuses, and when it comes down to it, I think the actual end user is the best decider for that, because you're actually implementing it in the real world. Template developers are really just kind of saying, okay, let's grab this design and put it with this functionality, and I think it's only when it's really tested that you can answer that question. So I would maybe point to, I've been doing it for almost 2 years now, or no, it is 2 years now, and so I understand responsive design quite well. I don't claim to be perfect at it, but I'm continually kind of learning.
Well, they gave you great reviews on lynn.com.
That was great. Good to know. Thank you.